Jake Martinez rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the screens in front of him. It was 3 in the morning, ship time, and he had been watching empty space for 6 hours straight. The monitoring station Watchdog 7 floated quietly near Jupiter, listening for any signs of alien life. For 12 years, Jake had been doing this job, and for 12 years, had found nothing but silence. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Jake drank it anyway. His job was boring, but someone had to do it. Earth had built dozens of these stations around the solar system, all of them watching and waiting for the day when aliens would finally talk to humanity. Most people thought it would never happen. Jake was starting to agree with them. Then his computer made a sound he had never heard before. Jake sat up straight and looked at his screens. Numbers were flashing red everywhere. Something was coming in on the deep space radio, something strong and clear. But it was not coming from anywhere in the solar system. The signal was coming from far away, farther than any human had ever traveled. "Amy," Jake shouted across the small control room. "Amy, get over here right now." Lieutenant Amy Foster was the station's communications officer. She had been sleeping in the back room, but Jake's yelling woke her up fast. She ran to his station wearing her pajamas and holding a cup of coffee. "What is it?" Amy asked, looking at the flashing screens. "I think we got something," Jake said. His hands were shaking as he pointed at the displays. "Look at this signal strength. This is not natural. Someone is sending this to us." Amy sat down at her own station and started working. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to understand what they were receiving. The signal was complex, full of patterns and codes that looked almost like language, but it was not like any human language they knew. "Jake, you need to call Dr. Bennett," Amy said, without looking up from her work. "We need him here right now." Dr. Carl Bennett was the station's expert on alien languages. Had spent his whole life studying how aliens might try to talk to humans. Most people thought his job was useless, but right now, Jake was very happy. They had him. Jake made the call, and Dr. Bennett arrived 10 minutes later. He was an older man with gray hair and thick glasses. He looked excited and scared at the same time. "Show me what you have," Dr. Bennett said. Amy played the signal for him. It was a series of beeps and tones that went on for several minutes. To Jake, it sounded like noise, but Dr. Bennett listened very carefully. He made notes on his tablet and asked Amy to play it again and again. "This is incredible," Dr. Bennett said, after listening for the 4th time. "This is definitely artificial. Someone made this signal on purpose. But there is something else. This signal is not just trying to say hello. There is emotion in it. Fear, desperation." Jake felt cold all over. "What do you mean?" Dr. Bennett looked at his notes. "I think this is a distress call. Someone out there is in trouble, and they are asking for help." The 3 humans worked together for the next 6 hours. Amy used the station's powerful computers to clean up the signal, make it clearer. Dr. Bennett compared the patterns to every language database that Earth had. Jake coordinated with the other monitoring stations to see if they were getting the same signal. Slowly, the message started to make sense. The aliens called themselves the Villani. They came from a world that was very far away, in a star system that human astronomers had discovered but never visited. The Villani were in a war, and they were losing badly. The enemy was something called the Harvesters. From what Dr. Bennett could understand, the Harvesters were not alive like the Villani or humans. They were machines, but very smart machines that could think and plan. They traveled from star to star, destroying entire civilizations, and using the materials to build more of themselves. "The Villani have been fighting for 3 years," Dr. Bennett explained to Jake and Amy, "but the Harvesters are too strong. The Villani are asking anyone who can hear this message to help them. They have included star maps showing where their world is and information about the enemy." Jake looked at the star map on his screen. The Villani homeworld was so far away that it would take human spaceships decades to reach it, even with their fastest engines. But the message was clear. An entire species was about to be wiped out, and they were begging for someone to save them. "We have to tell Earth Command," Jake said. "This changes everything." "Yes," Dr. Bennett agreed. "Is the most important day in human history. We are not alone in the universe, and our new neighbors need our help." Amy was still working at her station, trying to pull more information out of the signal. "There is more data here," she said. "Technical information. About harvester ships and weapons. The Villani are sharing everything they know about the enemy." Jake sent an emergency message to Earth Command. Within hours, every important person on Earth knew about the Villani distress call. Politicians argued about what to do. Scientists wanted to study the message more. But the military leaders had a different idea. Captain Lisa Barnes was one of the first people to volunteer for a rescue mission. She had been a Space Navy officer for 20 years, and she had always dreamed of meeting aliens. But she had never imagined that first contact would happen during a war. "We cannot just ignore this," Captain Barnes argued in a meeting with Earth's leaders. "These Villani are fighting for their lives against machines that destroy entire worlds. If we do nothing, they will die. And if the harvesters win, they might come looking for Earth next." Some people disagreed. They said humanity was not ready for a war against alien machines. They said Earth should stay safe and hidden. But Captain Barnes and others like her won the argument. Earth would send a fleet to help the Villani. It would be dangerous, and many humans might die. But it was the right thing to do. Humanity had always been willing to fight for others, even when those others were aliens from distant stars. Jake Martinez watched the news reports from his monitoring station. In just a few days, his boring job had become the most important work in human history. He had heard the first alien message ever received by humanity. And now, Earth was going to war because of it. The signal from the Villani was still coming in, weaker now, but still there. Jake listened to it and wondered if the aliens knew that help was coming. He hoped they could hold on long enough for the human fleet to arrive, because if they could not, humanity's first alien friends would be dead before they ever met. Fleet Admiral Nick Thompson stood in the massive shipyard above. Marzen watched hundreds of workers prepare humanity's most powerful warships for battle. The red planet glowed below them, while welders and engineers crawled over the hulls of enormous spacecraft like ants on metal giants. Nick had been building this fleet for 15 years, always hoping he would never need to use it. Now that day had come. The biggest ship was the EDF Retribution, a battleship half a mile long and bristling with weapons. Captain Lisa Barnes would command it, leading the entire rescue mission to save the Villani. Nick trusted Lisa more than any other officer in the fleet. She was smart, brave, and stubborn enough to fight impossible battles and win them. "Admiral Thompson, the weapon systems are ready for testing," said Chief Engineer Tony Rodriguez. Tony was a short, thick man who had spent his whole life building bigger and better ways to destroy things. He looked excited and worried at the same time. Nick followed Tony through the corridors of the Retribution. The ship was like a floating city with thousands of rooms and corridors. But every part of it was designed for one purpose: to fight and win battles in space. The walls were thick armor. The hallways were wide enough to move weapons and supplies quickly. Everything was built to survive in a war. They reached the weapons control room, where dozens of technicians sat at computer stations. On the main screen, Nick could see a target ship floating a safe distance away. It was an old cargo hauler that the Navy no longer needed. Today it would help them test humanity's most powerful weapons. "Show me the antimatter torpedoes first," Nick said. Tony pressed some buttons, and the screen showed a torpedo launching from the Retribution. It was a sleek metal cylinder about the size of a small car. Inside it was a tiny amount of antimatter, the most dangerous substance humans had ever created. When antimatter touched normal matter, both disappeared in a flash of pure energy. The torpedo hit the target ship, and there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the entire cargo hauler vanished in a ball of white light. The explosion was so bright that the cameras automatically dimmed to protect the viewer's eyes. When the light faded, there was nothing left but glowing gas. "One torpedo can destroy a ship the size of a city block," Tony explained. "We have loaded 300 of them on the Retribution alone." Nick nodded. The antimatter torpedoes were impressive, but he knew the alien machines called harvesters were not normal enemies. They had been fighting the Villani for 3 years, and winning. Humanity needed every advantage they could get. "What about the plasma lance arrays?" Nick asked. Tony switched to a different camera view. This time the screen showed another old ship floating in space. But instead of launching a torpedo, the Retribution fired a beam of pure energy. The plasma lance cut through the target ship, like a sword through paper. The beam lasted only 3 seconds, but it sliced the entire ship in half. The plasma lances can fire continuously for up to 30 seconds, Tony said. They can cut through any armor we know about, but they use enormous amounts of power. Nick was satisfied with the weapons, but he knew that firepower alone would not win this war. He left the Retribution and took a shuttle to another ship in the fleet. The EDF Vengeance was smaller than the flagship, but it carried the most advanced electronic warfare systems humanity had ever built. Captain Roy Parker met Nick at the airlock. Roy was a thin, quiet man who understood computers better than most people understood their own families. His job was to fight the enemy's electronic systems while the other ships fought with guns and missiles. "Admiral, I want to show you something." "Important," Roy said. He led Nick to a special room filled with computers and screens. Dr. Helen Walsh has been studying the information the Villani sent us about the harvesters. Dr. Walsh was a woman in her 40s, with short blonde hair and very serious eyes. She had spent the last week trying to understand how the alien machines worked. Nick hoped she had found something useful. "Admiral Thompson, I think I have found a weakness in the harvester systems," Dr. Walsh said. She pointed to a complex diagram on one of her screens. "The machines are all connected to each other through quantum communication links. They share information instantly across vast distances. It makes them very coordinated, but it also makes them vulnerable." Nick studied the diagram. It was not a scientist, but he had learned enough about technology to understand military applications. What kind of vulnerability? If we can disrupt their quantum network, the harvesters will lose their ability to coordinate attacks, Dr. Walsh explained. They will still be dangerous individually, but they will not be able to work together as a fleet. Our ships could pick them off one by one. Captain Parker smiled. "I have been working with Dr. Walsh to develop special virus programs. If we can get close enough to a harvester command ship, we can inject these viruses into their network. It will not destroy them directly, but it will confuse them badly." Nick felt hopeful for the first time since reading the Villani distress call. Humanity had better weapons than the aliens expected, and now they had a plan to exploit the enemy's weakness. But there was still one more part of the mission to prepare. Colonel Dan Mitchell commanded the 3rd Orbital Assault Division, humanity's elite space marines. These soldiers were trained to fight on spaceships, space stations, and alien planets. If the fleet needed to send troops to the ground, Dan's Marines would lead the way. Nick found Dan in the training section of Mars Base, where hundreds of Marines were practicing combat in artificial gravity. The soldiers wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed to work in space or on alien worlds. They moved like dancers, flowing smoothly between different levels of gravity and air pressure. "Colonel Mitchell, are your troops ready for this mission?" Nick asked. Don was a big man with scars on his face from previous battles. He had been fighting in space for 20 years, longer than anyone else in the service. "Admiral, my Marines are ready to fight anywhere, anytime. But I have to ask you something. Do we know what the Villani look like? Will our troops be able to tell the difference between friends and enemies?" Nick had wondered about the same thing. The Villani had sent pictures of themselves along with their distress call. They were taller than humans, with blue-green skin and large eyes. Most importantly, they had patterns of light on their skin that changed color with their emotions. It would be easy to tell them apart from the mechanical harvesters. "The Villani are definitely organic, not machines," Nick told Dan. "Your Marines should not have trouble identifying allies. Remember, we are going to their world. They know the territory better than we do. Listen to their advice." Don nodded. "Understood, sir. My troops have been studying the planetary information the Villani provided. We are ready to work with them." The final piece of the mission was transportation. Humanity had recently developed the Ross drive, a new type of engine that could travel faster than light. It was still experimental, and no one knew how reliable it would be on a long journey. But it was the only way to reach the Villani in time to help them. Dr. Susan Lee was the lead engineer for the Ross Drive project. She was young and brilliant, but she looked nervous when Nick asked her about the engine's reliability. "Admiral, the Ross Drive has only been tested on short trips within our solar system," Dr. Lee admitted. "A journey to the Villani homeworld is much longer than anything we have attempted. I estimate a 70% chance of success." Nick considered the odds. 70% was not great, but it was better than zero. If they did not try, the Villani would certainly die. "Dr. Lee, make sure every ship in the fleet has backup systems for the Ross Drive," Nick ordered. "If one ship's engine fails, the others need to be able to help." Within a week, Task Force Avalanche was ready to depart. The fleet consisted of 12 ships, the battleship Retribution, 4 heavy cruisers including the Vengeance and the Defiance, 5 destroyers, and 2 supply ships. Nearly 10,000 humans were preparing to travel farther from Earth than anyone had ever gone before. Nick stood on the bridge of the Retribution as the fleet prepared to enter hyperspace. Captain Barnes was at the command station, giving orders to her crew. The ship hummed with power as the Ross Drive engines prepared to tear a hole in space and time. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Captain Barnes said. "We can depart on your command." Nick looked at the stars through the main view screen. Somewhere out there, an alien species was fighting for its life against mechanical enemies. In a few weeks, humanity would join that battle. Win or lose, nothing would ever be the same. "Task Force Avalanche, this is Admiral Thompson," Nick said into his communicator. "Today we make history. Today we prove that no one fights alone while humans draw breath. All ships engage Ross Drive. Let's go save some aliens." The stars stretched into lines of light, and the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and Captain Lisa Barnes immediately knew they had arrived in hell. The main screen of the Retribution showed a world that was dying. Thyros, the Villani homeworld, glowed red with the fires of war. Massive explosions bloomed across its surface like deadly flowers. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Steve Logan, the ship's tactical officer. "Look at the size of those enemy ships." Harvester fleet hung in orbit around Thyros like metallic vultures. Each ship was enormous, some as big as small moons. They were not built like human ships, with smooth curves and practical designs. Instead, they looked like geometric puzzles, made of black metal and glowing lights. They moved with cold precision, firing energy beams down at the planet below. "Captain Barnes, we are receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer Amy Foster, who had been transferred to the flagship for the mission. "It is coming from a Villani ship." "Put it on screen," Lisa ordered. The view screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at their first living alien. The Villani commander was tall and thin, much taller than any human. His skin was blue-green like ocean water, and patterns of light moved across his face and arms. The light patterns were pulsing rapidly, and even without understanding the alien language, Lisa could tell the being was desperate. "Unknown vessels," the aliens said in accented but clear English. "I am Commander Zextai of the Eternal Vigil. Are you the ones who answered our distress call? Please, we do not have much time. The harvesters will complete their bombardment within hours." Lisa stepped forward. This was the moment she had trained for her entire career. But nothing could have prepared her for making first contact during a battle. "Commander Zextai, I am Captain Lisa Barnes of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your message and came to help." "What is your tactical situation?" The light patterns on Zextai's skin shifted to different colors. Lisa had to guess she would. Say the alien was feeling surprise and hope at the same time. "Earth, we have never heard of your world, but you came across the galaxy to help us. This is ... This is beyond our greatest hopes." "We can discuss that later," Lisa said firmly. "Right now, we need to fight." Many harvester ships are in the system. 47 capital ships and over 200 smaller vessels, Zextai replied. "We have only 12 ships left, and most of those are damaged. Our weapons cannot penetrate their shields. We've been fighting for 3 years, but they adapt to everything we try." Admiral Thompson's voice came over the comm system from his position in the Fleet Command Center. "Captain Barnes, we are outnumbered 4-1. But we have advantages they do not expect. Begin the attack." Lisa turned to her tactical officer. Commander Logan, target the nearest harvester ship. Load antimatter torpedoes and prepare to show these machines what human firepower looks like. Retribution moved forward, followed by the rest of the human fleet. The harvesters noticed them immediately. Several of the huge enemy ships turned away from their bombardment of the planet and moved to intercept the newcomers. Interesting, Logan observed, studying his displays. The enemy ships are moving in perfect formation. No wasted motion, no hesitation. They really are machines. Fire when ready, Lisa ordered. The first antimatter torpedo launched from the Retribution and streaked across space toward the lead harvester ship. The enemy vessel tried to intercept the weapon with defensive fire, but the torpedo was too fast and too small. It struck the harvester's shields and detonated. The explosion lit up the entire system. When the light faded, the harvester's ship was gone. Not damaged, not disabled, but completely destroyed. There was nothing left but expanding gas and debris. The light patterns on Commander Zex's skin went wild with excitement. Impossible. That ship had been fighting us for months, so our strongest weapons could barely scratch its shields. Ow! Did you destroy it with one shot? Antimatter, Lisa explained briefly. We will teach you about it later. Right now, we have more targets. The human fleet spread out and began engaging the harvester forces. The heavy cruiser Vengeance, commanded by Captain Roy Parker, used its electronic warfare systems to jam the enemy communications. The Defiance, under Captain Beth Turner, fired its plasma lances at the enemy formation, cutting through harvester ships like a hot knife through butter. But the machines were learning fast. After losing 5 ships to antimatter torpedoes, the harvesters began using new tactics. They started jamming human targeting systems and launching swarms of smaller attack craft. Captain, the enemy is adapting to our weapons, Logan reported. Their shields are becoming more effective against our torpedoes. Lisa was not surprised. The Volani had warned them that the harvesters learned from every battle, but humans had advantages that the machines did not understand yet. Ships. Switch to pattern Delta, Lisa ordered. This was a tactical formation that no computer would expect because it looked random and wasteful. But human commanders had used similar tactics for thousands of years. The human ships scattered in what appeared to be panic, but it was actually a carefully planned maneuver. Each ship attacked from a different angle, using different weapons, making it impossible for the harvesters to adapt to all of them at once. The Volani ship Eternal Vigil joined the battle. Following the human ships and adding its own firepower, Commander Zexty proved to be a skilled warrior, using his knowledge of harvester weaknesses to guide human attacks to the most vulnerable targets. Human ships, be warned, Zexty transmitted. The large harvester vessel approaching from the planet is their command ship. It coordinates all the others. If you can destroy it, the entire enemy fleet will be disrupted. Lisa looked at the tactical display. The harvester command ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Retribution. It was heavily armed and protected by layers of shields that had withstood years of Volani attacks. Admiral Thompson requesting permission to engage the command ship, Lisa said. Mission granted, Thompson replied. Retribution. We are making our stand here. The human fleet converged on the command ship, firing everything they had. Antimatter torpedoes, plasma lances, and conventional missiles all struck the massive enemy vessel. Its shields flared and sparked. But held, the command ship's shields are too strong, Logan reported. We need to find another way. Dr. Helen Walsh's voice came over the com from the Vengeance. Captain Barnes, I have been analyzing the Harvester Communications Network. If we can get close enough to inject my virus programs, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. How close? Lisa asked. Very close. A fighter would need to penetrate their shields and make physical contact with the hull. Lisa looked around the bridge. Every member of her crew was ready to volunteer for what sounded like a suicide mission. But before she could choose someone, another voice spoke up. Captain, this is Lieutenant Jack Sanders in Fighter Bay 2. My ship is equipped with the latest stealth systems and Dr. Walsh's virus programs. Request permission to attempt infiltration of the enemy command ship. Lisa knew Jack Sanders. He was young, brave, and one of the best pilots in the fleet. He was also the kind of person who would volunteer for impossible missions just because they needed to be done. Permission granted, Lieutenant, but make it quick. We cannot hold off their entire fleet much longer. Jack's fighter launched from the Retribution and immediately disappeared from sensors. The stealth systems made it nearly invisible, but Lisa knew that would not last long once the harvesters realized what was happening. The battle continued to rage around them. Human ships were taking damage now as the harvesters brought more weapons. To bear, the destroyer Brave was hit by a massive energy beam and exploded, taking 200 crew members with it. The cruiser Vengeance lost its forward armor and was leaking atmosphere. Jack, what is your status? Lisa asked. Approaching the command ship now, came the reply. Their shields are down to 60% from your bombardment. I think I can get through. On the main screen, Lisa could see tiny explosions on the surface of the Harvester command ship as Jack's fighter battled through the enemy defenses. Point defense weapons tried to shoot him down, but his ship was too small and too fast. I am through their shields, Jack reported, making contact with the hull now. Uploading Dr. Walsh's virus programs. For a moment, nothing happened. The Harvester command ship continued to coordinate the enemy fleet with mechanical precision. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The virus programs that Dr. Walsh had designed did not destroy the Harvester network. Instead, they made the machines forget how to tell the difference between friend and enemy. Within seconds, Harvester ships began firing on each other. It is working, Zextai shouted over the communications. The enemy fleet is attacking itself. Lisa watched in amazement as 42 Harvester ships turned their weapons on each other in a spectacular display of mechanical confusion. The machines that had terrorized the Villani for 3 years were destroying themselves in minutes. Jack, get out of there before they figure out what happened, Lisa ordered. Already on my way home, Captain. That was the most fun I have had all week. Within an hour, the Harvester fleet was gone. Some ships had been destroyed by their own allies. Others had fled the system when their coordination network collapsed. The victory in space was just the beginning. As the last Harvester ships fled or died above Thyros, Admiral Thompson received disturbing news from the planet's surface. The machines had been building factories down there for 3 years, turning Villani cities into production centers for more war machines. Those factories were still working, and they would keep making harvesters until someone stopped them. Captain Barnes, we need to take the fight to the ground, Admiral Thompson said over the communications. Colonel Mitchell, prepare your Marines for planetary assault. Colonel Dan Mitchell had been waiting for this order. His soldiers were already suited up and ready to go. The 3rd Orbital Assault Division was the toughest fighting force humanity had ever created. Trained to fight in any environment from asteroid mines to alien jungles. Admiral, my Marines are ready, Dan reported from the assault ship Lightning. But we will need local guides. The Villani know their own planet better than we do. Commander Zextai's voice came over the channel. Colonel Mitchell, I am sending our best ground commander to work with you. Her name is Koljan, and she has been fighting the Harvesters on the surface for 2 years. She knows every tunnel and hiding place in the occupied zones. Don nodded. Working with alien soldiers would be a new experience for his troops, but they were professionals. They would adapt. How many Harvester facilities are we looking at? 7 major factory complexes, Zexti replied. Each one is heavily defended by ground units. The machines have built walls and weapon towers around every facility. It will not be easy. Easy is boring, Dan said with a grin. My Marines prefer the hard jobs. The assault began an hour later. Drop pods launched from the human ships like metal rain, carrying Marines down through Thyros' atmosphere. Each pod was designed to survive enemy fire and deliver its passengers safely to the ground, even in the middle of a battle zone. Sergeant Rita Cruz rode in the lead pod of Alpha Company. She was a small woman, but she had fought in more battles than soldiers twice her size. Her specialty was explosives, and she was carrying enough bombs to level a city block. As her pod shook and rattled through the atmosphere, she checked her equipment one more time. 2 minutes to landing, the pod's computer announced. Enemy fire detected. Brace for impact. The pod slammed into the ground near the largest harvester factory. A massive complex of metal buildings and smoking chimneys. Rita kicked open the hatch and rolled out, her rifle already in her hands. Around her, dozens of other pods were landing and disgorging Marines. The harvesters were waiting for them. Machine soldiers poured out of the factory buildings, their metal bodies gleaming in the red light of the burning city. They looked like walking skeletons made of steel, with glowing red eyes and weapons built into their arms. "Contact front," shouted Corporal Ben Hayes, the squad's heavy weapons specialist. He opened fire with his plasma cannon, cutting down 3 machine soldiers with one shot. These things are tougher than they look. The harvester ground units were different from their spaceships. They were smaller, faster, and designed for close combat. But they still thought like machines, moving in predictable patterns and following programmed tactics. That was their mistake. Human soldiers did not fight like machines. Alpha Company, scatter and advance. Don ordered over the radio. Use the rubble for cover. Do not let them pin you down in one place. The Marines spread out across the battlefield, using the ruins of Villani buildings to hide from enemy fire. They moved in small groups, never staying in one place long enough for the harvesters to target them effectively. Rita found herself crouched behind a broken wall with 3 other Marines. Ahead of them, a harvester patrol was moving down the street in perfect formation. She pulled out a special grenade that she had been working on during the trip to Thyros. "What is that?" asked Private Mike Torres, a young soldier on his first mission. "Something new," Rita said with a smile. "I mixed human explosives with Villani crystal technology. Let us see what happens." She threw the grenade at the harvester patrol. When it exploded, the blast was twice as powerful as anything the Marines had seen before. The crystal fragments acted like tiny missiles, tearing through the machine soldiers' armor. "Holy shit, Sergeant!" Mike exclaimed. "How did you make that thing?" "I had some help," Rita said. A tall, blue-green figure emerged from the shadows behind them. It was Koljan, the Villani ground commander. She moved with liquid grace, her skin patterns shifting rapidly as she spoke. "Your explosives are powerful," Koljan said in accented English. "But my people's crystals can focus that power. Together we can make weapons the harvesters have never seen." For the next 6 hours, the battle raged through the streets of the occupied city. The Marines quickly learned to work with their Villani allies. The aliens knew every secret passage and hidden route in their own city, while the humans brought superior firepower and aggressive tactics. Ben Hayes found himself fighting alongside a Villani warrior named Telmar. The alien carried a weapon that fired crystal spears, while Ben used his plasma cannon to clear groups of enemies. They made an effective team, covering each other's weaknesses. "Human," Ben Telmar said during a brief rest between battles, "your people fight differently than we do. You take risks that seem foolish, but they work. Why is this?" Ben thought about it while reloading his weapon. "I guess we are just crazy enough to try things that make no sense. Sometimes crazy works better than smart." The Villani warrior's skin patterns shifted to what Ben was learning meant amusement. "Perhaps that is why you defeated the harvesters in space. They could not understand your craziness." The main target was the central factory, a towering complex that produced new harvester soldiers. It was surrounded by walls 20 feet high and defended by automated weapons that could track and fire at anything that moved. Colonel Mitchell knew that a direct assault would cost too many lives. "We need a different approach," Dan said to his officers. "Something the machines will not expect." That was when Rita Cruz had an idea. She had been studying the factory's layout and noticed something interesting. The harvesters had built their defenses to stop attacks from outside the walls, but they had not planned for someone attacking from below. "Colonel, the Villani have extensive tunnel systems under their cities," Rita explained. Koljan says there are maintenance tunnels that run right under the factory. If I can get a team down there with enough explosives, we can bring down the whole complex from the inside. Don liked the plan. It was exactly the kind of unexpected tactic that human soldiers excelled at. "How many people do you need?" "Give me 6 Marines and a dozen Villani guides," Rita said. "We will need to move fast once we plant the charges." The harvesters will figure out what we are doing pretty quickly. The tunnel mission began at midnight. Rita led her team through narrow passages that had been carved out of rock centuries ago. The Villani guides moved silently. It's their natural ability to see in low light, making them perfect for underground operations. The tunnels were cramped and dark, barely wide enough for a human soldier in full armor. Strange sounds echoed from above. As the harvester factory continued its work, building new machines to replace the ones that had been destroyed in battle. "How much further?" whispered Private Mike Torres. He was carrying half of Rita's explosive charges, and the weight was making him nervous. "Not far," replied Quindel, one of the Villani guides. "The main support pillars are just ahead. If we can destroy those, the entire factory will collapse." They reached their target 30 minutes later. The support pillars were massive columns of metal and concrete that held up the factory floor. Rita began placing her charges while the others kept watch for enemy patrols. "Sergeant, we have a problem," Ben Hayes whispered into his radio. "Motion sensors are picking up movement above us. I think the harvesters know we are here." Rita worked faster, her hands moving quickly to set the timers on her explosives. She had learned during years of combat that the difference between success and failure was often measured in seconds. "Charges set," she announced. "Everyone out, now." The team raced back through the tunnels as alarms began blaring above them. The harvesters had indeed discovered the infiltration, and they were sending ground units into the tunnel system to stop the saboteurs. "Move, move, move." Don shouted over the radio from his position outside the factory. He could see machine soldiers pouring into tunnel entrances, their red eyes glowing in the darkness. Rita's team reached the exit tunnel, just as the first harvester soldiers caught up with them. Ben Hayes turned and fired his plasma cannon down the narrow passage, temporarily blocking the pursuit. But more machines were coming, and the humans were running out of time. 10 seconds to detonation, Rita announced. The team burst out of the tunnel entrance and ran for cover behind a pile of rubble. Behind them, they could hear the mechanical sounds of harvester soldiers climbing through the passages. The explosion, when it came, was spectacular. The entire factory complex shuddered as Rita's charges destroyed the support pillars. Then, with a sound like thunder, the massive structure collapsed in on itself. Smoke and dust billowed up into the night sky as tons of metal and machinery crashed down into the tunnels below. "Target destroyed," Rita reported with satisfaction. "That factory will not be making any more machines." There. The war was over, but victory felt heavy in Captain Lisa Barnes's hands. She stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking down at Thyros through the main view screen. The planet was free, but it bore the scars of 3 years of fighting. Ataya. Cities had been reduced to rubble, and the atmosphere still glowed with the fires of destroyed harvester. Facilities. The cost of victory was written in the casualty reports on her desk. The heavy cruiser Defiance had been destroyed in the final space battle, taking Captain Beth Turner and her entire crew of 800 people with her. On the ground, 43 Marines had died fighting through the streets and tunnels of the occupied cities. These were not just numbers to Lisa. She had known many of these people personally. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Villani government," reported Communications Officer Amy Foster. "Commander Zexty is requesting permission to come aboard." Lisa nodded. "Grant permission. Have him meet me in conference room 2. An hour later, Lisa sat across from the Villani commander in a room that had been hastily modified to accommodate his height. Zexty was even taller than she had expected, nearly 8 feet from head to toe. His skin patterns were moving slowly, in colors that Lisa was learning meant deep sadness mixed with gratitude. Captain Barnes's Zexty began, his voice heavy with emotion. "My people have asked me to speak for all of Thyros. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You came across the galaxy to help strangers, and many of your people died for us. Why would you do such a thing?" Lisa thought carefully before answering. "Commander, my species has a saying. We believe that evil succeeds when good people do nothing. The harvesters were evil. They were destroying entire civilizations just to make more copies of themselves. We could not let that continue." Zexty's skin patterns shifted to what Lisa was beginning to recognize as wonder. but the risk to your own people was enormous. You could have stayed safe on your own world. Safety is not the most important thing, Lisa replied. Sometimes you have to risk everything to do what is right. That is what makes us human. The Volani commander was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small crystal cube. The cube was perfectly clear, but light seemed to dance inside it like captured starfire. Captain Barnes, this crystal contains the complete history and scientific knowledge of my people, Zextai explained. It represents 20,000 years of Volani civilization. We have never shared this with another species, but you have earned our trust. We offer this as a gift of friendship between our peoples. Lisa accepted the crystal carefully. She could feel a slight warmth from it, as if it was alive. Commander Zextai, this is an incredible honor. But what do your people want in return? Nothing, Zextai said firmly. This is a gift freely given. But if I may ask something of you, it would be this. The harvesters were not the only threat in the galaxy. There are other machine intelligences, other species that consume worlds. If you hear their distress calls, I hope humanity will answer them as you answered ours. Before Lisa could respond, Admiral Thompson's voice came over the intercom. Captain Barnes, please report to the communications center immediately. We have an urgent situation. Lisa excused herself and hurried to the ship's communications center, where she found Admiral Thompson, Dr. Helen Walsh, and Dr. Carl Bennett gathered around a bank of monitors. All three looked worried. Admiral, what is the situation? Lisa. As Dr. Bennett looked up from his screens. Captain, we have been monitoring long-range communications since the battle ended. We are picking up multiple distress signals from other star systems. It appears that the harvester attack on Thyros was not an isolated incident. The main screen showed a three-dimensional map of nearby star systems. Red dots marked the locations of distress signals, and there were far too many of them. Lisa counted at least 20 different systems, all sending out desperate pleas for help. Some of these signals are very recent, Dr. Walsh added. Others have been broadcasting for years. There are machine intelligences attacking civilizations all across this region of the galaxy. Admiral Thompson pointed to one of the red dots. This signal is particularly concerning. It is coming from a system only 50 light-years from Earth. If whatever is attacking them decides to expand their territory, they could reach our solar system within decades. Lisa studied the map with growing alarm. The situation was much worse than they had imagined. The harvesters had been just one tentacle of a much larger threat that was spreading across the galaxy like a plague. Do we know what kinds of enemies we are dealing with? Lisa asked. Dr. Bennett pulled up another display. From what we can decode, there are at least 3 different types of machine intelligences. The harvesters that we fought here are actually one of the smaller threats. There are others that are much more dangerous. The screen showed intercepted images from various distress calls. One showed spider-like machines the size of buildings that were literally eating planets, converting the raw materials into more of themselves. Another showed clouds of tiny robots that could strip the atmosphere from a world in a matter of days. My God, Lisa whispered. How long has this been going on? Based on the age of some of these signals, we estimate that machine intelligences have been attacking organic civilizations for at least 50 years, Dr. Walsh replied. Possibly longer. Most species seem to fight alone and lose quickly. Admiral Thompson turned away from the displays. Captain Barnes, I am recommending to Earth Command that we establish a permanent military presence in this region. The threat. It's too large for any one species to handle alone, Lisa nodded. What about the Volani? Are they willing to work with us? Commander Zextai has already offered to form an alliance, Thompson replied. His people have advanced biotechnology and energy systems that could be very useful. In exchange, they want our protection and military training. Over the next week, the human fleet worked with Volani engineers to establish a joint defense station in orbit around Thyros. The station would serve as headquarters for what they were calling the Galactic Liberation Fleet, combined force dedicated to helping civilizations defend themselves against machine threats. Colonel Don Mitchell found himself training Volani, soldiers in human combat tactics. The aliens were eager students, quickly learning the value of unpredictable strategies and improvised weapons. In return, they taught the humans about Volani crystal technology and bioengineering. The Volani have some interesting ideas about warfare. Don explained to Admiral Thompson during one of their planning sessions. They focus on harmony and coordination, while we specialize in chaos and aggression. Together, we might be able to develop tactics that no machine intelligence can counter. Dr. Helen Walsh was working with Volani scientists to understand the quantum communication networks that the machines used. Her virus programs had been effective against the harvesters, but she knew that other machine intelligences would have different weaknesses. The key is to understand how each type of artificial intelligence thinks. She explained to her mixed team of human and Volani researchers. Machines are logical, but they are logical in different ways. If we can map their thought patterns, we can find ways to disrupt them. The memorial service for the humans who had died in the battle was held in the main hangar of the Retribution. Captain Beth Turner and her crew were honored alongside the Marines who had fallen on the planet's surface. The Volani attended the ceremony, their skin patterns showing deep respect for the fallen warriors. These people died so that an entire species could live, Admiral Thompson said in his speech. They knew the risks, but they came anyway because it was the right thing to do. That is the human way. We do not fight for conquest or glory. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Commander Zexty spoke for the Volani. Your fallen warriors will be remembered forever in our histories. They will be honored as the heroes who saved our world. Their sacrifice is forged a bond between our peoples that will never be broken. As Task Force Avalanche prepared to return to Earth, Lisa received one more surprise. Lieutenant Jack Sanders, the pilot who had delivered the virus to the Harvester command ship, was waiting in her ready room with a request. Captain, I would like to volunteer for permanent assignment to the Galactic Liberation Fleet, Jack said. I think we are going to need experienced pilots out here, and I want to be part of the fight. Lisa was not surprised. Jack was exactly the kind of person who would volunteer for a dangerous assignment in the name of helping others. Are you sure, Lieutenant? This could be a very long war, Jack grinned. Captain, I just helped save an entire alien species from extinction. How could I go back to flying cargo runs between Earth and Mars after something like that? This is where I belong. Over the next few days, dozens of other human personnel made similar requests. Marines, engineers, scientists, and communications specialists all asked to stay and help build the new defense fleet. They understood that this was the beginning of something much larger than a single battle. The Retribution and the remaining ships of Task Force Avalanche finally departed Thyros 2 weeks after the battle, but they left behind a permanent human presence and the promise that Earth would not abandon its new allies as the human fleet entered.